Today we're going to be doing an oil change on a 2015 Honda CR-V. So if you have one and you're looking to change the oil, I'd invite you to follow along. So let's get started. Today we're going to be changing the oil on this 2015 CR-V. You can see these blocks that I have made up, ramps. So it's set up so that when the car is at rest at the top of the ramp, it's setting directly on stacked blocks of wood, so there's no way that anything can break and collapse on us. Starting off up here at the top, on all my vehicles I write on the top the size of the drain plug wrench that I need, and then the total capacity, the refill capacity. We'll start off by loosening the cap here at the top so that it drains freely. We'll just set that off to the side. Alright, so we just need a number 2 Phillips, and we need to get this belly pan off. Oh, right over here. There's a, can you see that? Yeah, there's an aluminum belly pan over here, just held on by 3 or 4 of these little screws. Right, there we go. These little guys here, I just set those over here on my ramp. Now, like you saw, I like to make sure I take any vehicle for a drive that I'm going to be changing the oil, or maybe change it as soon as I get home. That way the oil is nice and warm. Any contaminants or sediment is suspended in the oil as best it can be, and also the oil just flows, drains a little bit better that way. Okay, there we go. So we can set that to the side. Let me bring you in a little bit closer. So you can see we have a combination of bolts and plugs here. It might be hard to tell from the angle of the camera, but this one here is at the lowest point of any of these, and you can tell by looking at the casting in the bottom of the engine housing here of the oil pan that this is a drain plug. It's at the lowest point. It's got a little washer on it. You can see a little aluminum crush washer sandwiched right in between there. So we're going to start by breaking that free. Grab our 17 millimeter. Alright, so that's broken free. Now we can bring our drain pan over here. And whenever you place your drain pan, I like to place it kind of back from the plug a little bit, because when that comes shooting out, it's gonna shoot out a ways. So then just gently kind of hold your hand back. Make sure you have your rag handy, because that hot oil dripping down your arm just isn't very fun. I like to hold pressure in until I get it all the way screwed out. That way I can grab the drain plug. Okay, there it's starting to drip. It's all the way unscrewed. I'm just gonna pull that out, just like that. Then grab the rag and wipe the oil off my hands. Just that, make sure everything's gonna drip right in there. Here we have our drain plug. I just wipe the oil off of it, wipe any dirt off of it. You can see that aluminum crush washer on there. Some people say to replace those. I try to replace it every few times I change the oil. You can do it every time. They're not that expensive, so replacing it every time can't hurt. Now we need to get our filter off. The oil's still draining out of the plug here, out of the main drain. We're just going to move our drain pan back as far as it'll go, kind of out of the way, best we can. Let it still drain. And then look up in here. There we go. So you can see where our drain plug is and our oil filter is right above it. So I'm going to try to get that off by hand. See if I can hold the camera and get it off at the same time. And a rag is just going to help me grip on there a little bit better. Remember, just like anything else, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So I'm just going to grab on that. Alright, and that did it. Now that strap wrench, I'll show you how to use that in a minute in case you can't get it off, in case it's just too tight. So again, this is a messy part of the process. Alright, yeah, so I just loosened that up and it wants to spit oil out because the filter is mounted at a bit of an angle. So you just kind of try to keep your hand out of the way, loosen up, let some oil drain, back your hand back out of the way. So we're going to do kind of almost a controlled fall here. I'm going to loosen it up as I can. That oil is pretty warm. Loosen it up, kind of let it fall into the pan. Yep, hands covered in oil, and that is hot. You just want to get that wiped off your hands. All right, now we can crawl out from under here. Make sure your pan's positioned so it's catching all your oil. So here's our new filter, and I'll show you the way this strap wrench works. So it's just basically a piece of square tubing. It's a 1/2 inch inside diameter that'll fit on a 1/2 inch ratchet. So say this was mounted to the car and I couldn't get it off by hand. I would start by pre-wrapping my strap wrench around the box tubing a little bit, and I'd just slip the nylon strap onto the filter and just keep wrapping. Then I can put a ratchet on here, and this allows me to get an extra, foot of leverage and twist that off. And of course I can kind of loosen it up and reposition the strap wrench on the filter and get another bite. It's a little bit awkward to initially learn how to use, but it's super handy if you've got an oil filter that is just on there too tight to be able to get off. It's not so bad on a car filter if you're changing the oil on a truck or something, it can be on there a little bit tighter. Alright, so I'm just going to peel the lid, the tabs off my oil filter box here. This one is a Mobil 1 M1 110A is the model. So I like on any new oil filter here, take our seal off our oil jug here. I like to pre-fill, and when you're pre-filling these oil filters, you want to start by drizzling a little bit on the outer edge there. Let that soak down through the filter some, and then just take a little bit of that and make sure that O-ring, that seal, is well coated with oil. That's going to help it seal in there better and keep from drying out. And then because the oil filter is mounted in the car at a bit of an angle, you don't want to fill it the whole way full. You'll fill it up and it'll drain down in some. Looks like we've got probably about 3/4 full in there. It's starting to go down a little bit, maybe half. Let me just drizzle a little bit more in there. That'll settle down to about 3/4 of the way full, and that'll be good. Now the purpose of doing this, of adding oil ahead of time to the filter, is that if we have that empty reservoir in there, there's going to be a little bit of lag time when we first start up the engine after the oil change. There'll be some time in there where the engine is not getting oil, so we want to reduce that time as much as possible. So we've given the car a few minutes to drain, get all that oil out. We can go back over here and get to work putting everything back together. There we go. You can still see that it's dripping some. I think that's about as good as we're gonna get, unless we want to be here all day. So we'll take our drain plug, which of course we've wiped the dirt off of. We'll stick that back in. Remember, lefty loosey, righty tighty. That's just hand tight. Now I can push the drain pan out of the way. Now remember, that's got an open top to it, so it's wanting to slosh oil everywhere. Don't let it get you. Alright, so we can bring our attention back up here. Before we go any further, we want to make sure and snug that down. Now I'm just going to use one wrench here. I can get it on with my left hand. There we go. And just good and snug. You don't want to strip those threads out. It's got that aluminum washer in there, which will crush some to make a good seal. That 6-point wrench won't let me get another bite. So just good and snug. Doesn't need to be super tight, just good and snug. We want to look up there at the surface where our oil filter is going to go, and we'll just reach up there with a rag and just wipe that off. There we go. I'm looking at it in the camera lens kind of backwards. Where'd it go? There we go. Kind of wipe everything off there. And you want to make sure that the seal from the old filter didn't stick on there, which it did not in this case, so we're good. And you just want to reach up in there, get that started on. Now again, the tightness on this oil filter is kind of sensitive, so you want to spin that on, and they say till it touches, which it just touched right there. The gasket just made contact, plus 3/4 to 1 full turn. So I'm going to put my rag back on it. You definitely don't want to use a wrench or a tool or a strap wrench on this. You'll get it way too tight. So put it on good and snug by hand, and that took it to about 3/4 of a turn past where the gasket made contact. Alright, so now we can refill our engine with oil. Now don't be afraid to use a funnel on this. Just get yourself a good funnel, make sure it's wiped out. You don't want any dirt getting down in your engine. You're trying to improve it, not tear it up. Just set your funnel in there. I have a little breather tube on here. It's not as important with this. It'll come in handy a little bit later on. And I buy oil in these 5-quart jugs, this Valvoline synthetic. I get this stuff from Walmart. It's pretty cheap. There's probably better oils out there, but well, they all claim to do great stuff, but how do you really know? So we just fill that up. Now we know from our mark here from previous oil changes that the owner's manual says it'll take 4.2 quarts. So I'm just gonna go till this is showing I got 1.5 quarts or 2 quarts left, so take a little bit more. So we should have about 3/4 of a quart left in our 5-quart jug. Right about in there. I'm going to let that drain down into the engine a little bit. Now the thing is, when you're checking oil when it's brand new, it just can be kind of hard to tell because the oil is so fresh and clear and clean. I'm just going to pull the dipstick out and see if we can see anything here. Wipe it off first. Stick it back in. Yeah, it looks like it's, I don't know if you can see this on camera. It's really kind of hard to tell. It's about halfway. Settled out about halfway between the two holes there. And I like to have it land between halfway and the whole way to the second mark up. So I'm going to stick this back in. pull this out and replace our cap here. If not, you'll get some blow by, just oil and whatnot, junk blowing back up, which you don't really need. Tighten that back down. Just gonna set our funnel here in the rag. We'll go back down below and throw that guard back on. So we have our 4 screws here. Before we put the plate back on, just take your flashlight, take a look around at everything, make sure there's no oil dripping off the filter or by the drain plug, and we're pretty clean. So we can grab our cover plate and just slip it back on. There's looks like 1 catch right here at this corner that goes in, and then there's another catch, actually one right here that this slides into, and then a tab right here. So there's ends up being 1 at the front there and then 2 at the back. So that kind of holds itself in place till we can get our screws in. There we go. Some people will just leave these cover plates off entirely. That makes it easier to change the oil. I've found though, in the winter time, we get snow around here, and some of that snow and slush and salt can just pack its way up into the engine compartment there, up in the bottom of these pans, and drag the rest of the belly pans down. So I like to put it back on, just to keep everything sealed up. They're there for a reason, so yeah. It's worth the extra couple minutes to me to make sure they get put back on right. All right, that's drained for a few seconds. Let's check it again. All right, that's just shy of the top mark. Put this back on. Now that we've actually changed the oil, it's time to reset the oil life, because it's currently at 5%, and with fresh oil it should be at 100. So we're going to start by pressing menu, and then I'm going to use these buttons on here to scroll through. So I'm going to scroll up, vehicle information, select maintenance info, select, and then we're going to reset using that center button. Scroll down, hit yes. Maintenance info has been reset, so the engine oil life is at 100%. Now we're going to need something to put our used oil in, and that's going to be our 5-quart jug here, but it's not quite empty. So I always keep these 1-quart jugs around from other oil changes. Sometimes I'll pick it up, buy 5 quarts of this instead of a 5-quart jug if I'm running low on the little bottles. And here's one that's partially full. So this is where the spout really comes in handy. This is just a piece of, I think, 1/8" copper tubing that I ran from the bottom side, clean up to the top, drilled a couple holes in there and put a tie wrap on, and that allows the air to vent up through as this bottle's being filled and prevent that glugging and splashing and gurgling. That jug's almost full. And having these 1-quart jugs around makes it easier to top off the oil, between changes. There we go, that's as full as I'm going to take that. Dump the rest in here. And we'll just let that sit upside down for a minute. Try to get as much out as we can. Don't really want to waste any. Set this up on some blocks here, just so it has a more stable base and it's less likely to fall over in the stones. Still have our filter in there, so we want to watch that doesn't fall out. And then I just splashed oil all over myself. Oh well. Just pour that in gently. You want to watch the back side of the jug. Keep an eye on the oil level and make sure you don't overfill the jug. Yeah, it looks like this is going to hold it. We'll just tip our filter up there so it can drain. Hopefully you can see this, but of course our oil drain pan still has some residual oil in it, as does our filter and our funnel. So I have here a 2x6 mounted vertically. I've got 2 screws up in the top side, and I've just got this 1 quart oil jug with the top cut out of it on a little shelf placed at a calculated height there. And I can lay the oil filter down in the pan. Then I can position my funnel. Again, if I use this every day, this wouldn't be a practical setup, but I use it, you know, once every couple months, so it works just fine. We got that set up, and then I can take, actually let me get rid of my rag, that's just in the way right now. I can take my oil jug with the top cut out and just position that like so. And then everything will tuck back in here. All the oil will drain out in time. My drain pan will hook up on these 2 screws at the top there. And then that 1 quart jug will just sit down on the shelf. Then finally I have a piece of cardboard that slides right in here, and that keeps any sawdust or any other dust and dirt from getting in the oil drain pan. I try to keep the drain pan and, you know, all the used oil as clean as possible. I have some ideas of some projects I want to use the used oil for that it'd be best not to have a bunch of sawdust in it and whatnot in it. That about wraps it up. One last note, a lot of guys, most commercial shops will take and write a little sticker and put up in the corner of the driver's side of the windshield with the miles and the date on it. You can do that. Sometimes I'll take a white paint pen and mark miles and date on the filter. Most of these newer cars like this one though have a sensor in it and a calculator that calculates the percentage of oil life left based on the miles and the trip length and the time that's passed. So I usually just go by that. I'll also take and write down, I have a maintenance log inside with all the vehicles and, you know, shop tools and stuff. Anything that I'll do regular maintenance on, I'll write the date and the miles on that, and maybe when the next when the next oil change should be due. So if you enjoy learning about how stuff works and how to fix it when it doesn't, I invite you to tap subscribe and hit the bell to be notified for future uploads. Also check out the other videos linked at the end. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.